are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Kevin Durso. Kevin, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. We got that new intro courtesy of you. Thank you very much for
Of
that.
course.
And as we're diving into that, we're getting in towards our off season here. It is our first official off season show. It is also show number 250, as you see if you're watching on our YouTube channel there. So, big milestone for the show. So it's nice to have a new intro, kind of change the vibe a little bit,
I
heading
was
towards a
about to
new
say, I feel
era.
better about having that ready to go for this than just some random other show number.
Absolutely. Hopefully the team's turning a corner. It's a good vibe for the future of the show. I think it's a good thing moving forward. We do have some Flyers news to get into. We have some Stanley Cup Final to cover here.
hmm
The draft show is mostly going to be next week. We are going to have another show next week here with a little bit of a draft preview. Uh, Getting into it today. Before we do, follow us on our social medias. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin underscore Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it is just at Kevin Durso. Get us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. So, okay, diving right into it. We do have a little bit of Flyers news here, and it starts with a contract extension for Noah Cates. 4 years, $4 million per year, $16 million total. Kevin, what do you think? Good deal? Bad deal? What's going on?
No, I think it's a great deal. I think it's a fair deal for both sides. Again, you knew he was getting a little bit more of a bump than other players were. When it
Yep.
comes to the money, you knew that was going to happen. And in fairness, too, the money bump also comes from the term there. This isn't the same thing as, Tyson Forrester got 2 years, 3.75 mil. Okay, but that's only a 2-year deal. You got to imagine if they would have tried to go 4 or 5, you're looking at upwards of $5 to $6 million
Well,
for a player like that.
and where does he play?
Oh, on the wing versus being
Right,
a center. Well,
right,
and here's the thing: there's no commitment to Cates being a center permanently per se.
right,
If you
right. If you
theoretically
get
found
deep
enough,
enough,
if you
right.
theoretically found enough centers, he's capable of being a good winger too. But he's
Absolutely,
really shown, and I think that's where the money bump comes from also, because he's shown what he can do playing center against some really good players on the other side. And
absolutely.
because of that, you've got to at least respect that. Think about it. He's probably going to be in your top 6 next season for sure. And then
Yep.
hopefully not beyond that, but there's always that possibility. You just don't know yet. But theoretically, you think about the whole 4-year term here. By the end of this thing, certainly by the middle of it, hopefully, he's your third line center. And that's $4 million is nothing for a third line center at that point. Once you really get past the next couple of off seasons and where the cap is supposed to be, it's going to feel like nothing. So that's why I like the deal.
It's a really nice little deal moving into an era where the cap is exploding. It's nice to have a guy who's going to fit in somewhere in your middle six for probably the entirety of that deal. If you do get deep enough on centers, like we were talking about,
Mhm.
um, putting him on the wing, like look at this Florida team. Obviously, we'll talk about them a little bit later in the show, but
Sure.
they are built at least 3 lines strong. And there are some superstars. Obviously, Barkov is a defensive superstar. Matthew Tkachuk's a personality superstar, etc. But like that is 3 really, really, really good lines.
hmm
And Noah Cates kind of fits that mold of being a really good winger in a top 9 that is a well-built team.
Right. And I would say either or, a good center or winger, honestly. Pick your
Absolutely.
spot. He's prototypical third line material
Absolutely.
that you happen to this year throw into top line minutes at times. That's the benefit here. You know, stylistically, he's not Scott Lawton, but you can utilize him in such a way where you can put him in different places and feel like he has a role and has more upside, in my opinion. He's got more offensive upside. So you kind of want to try to tap into that too while you're at it. He started to show more of that too. And if you can keep advancing that, he's got it's a very similar deal to Forster's, that you're banking on some growth here, and also at the same time saying we're going to commit to you. What they also do with Cates, and Cates is a little older, so that's another reason why you're going to do this, is you're taking the free agency period out of play here. You're avoiding the part where, this isn't just to his UFA year. It now extends it a little further. You get yourself some security with this player. He feels secure as well. It's almost essentially all of the prime years. He's going to go from, he's 26 now. He'll be 30 when the contract's up. It all adds up to part of what they're trying to build. Now, whatever gets around him from here on out is obviously a key part of this as well. But you got to start somewhere with certain guys. And Cates kind of jumps in now with this 4-year deal. There weren't many guys, at least up front anyway. There's not many guys. I mean, even on the back end, there's not really, but there's not many guys you can look at beyond next season and say, oh, they're part of this picture moving forward firmly. And I know right away, like, one of the things we can easily say is that, okay, Michkov's one of them, kind of. Like, Michkov's got 2 years left on the ELC, and then that part's done. So on the books, he's not locked in. But he's part of the future. But really, and aside from him and the fact that Tyson Forster's going to need another deal in 2 years, who else is there that they have under contract for less than 2 years at this point, or that has not signed yet, that you feel confident is going to be part of the team going forward for long term without more evaluation, without more of seeing if they're still part of the picture? I can't think of anybody.
No, I think they're doing a really good job of signaling who the core is going to be, who they expect to be, at least in those kind of middle 6 roles here, kind of moving forward. Again, you're talking about your Forresters and your Cateses and your Tippetts and, guys like that who are locked up a little bit longer term here. And I think that's a good thing. You leave some room for the stars, especially as the cap explodes. You can kind of hold a lot of that space for Mishkov and your goalies of the future, whether it's Vragan or somebody else or Bjarnason or whoever steps into there. Also, spoilers for next week's draft show. Those late first round picks, one of them is probably going to be a goalie. Anyway,
We'll discuss that.
We'll go into that next week more. But in the meantime, you have your middle to bottom 6 kind of locked up in really good prove it deals, right? Like, this is a good spot for Case. You mentioned it's the rest of his kind of super uber prime. You get him till he's 30. When he's 30, he's got enough sample size now. You either pay him and you lock him up for the rest of his career. You pay him, to these contracts that we're seeing now, these 7-8 year deals that are for $4 million, $5 million.
Right.
It'll be more than by then, but you know what I mean. Or you let him walk because he's not a part of your future at that point.
Sure.
We're talking about that 2-year window with Matvei Mishkov, and this is obviously a little bit beyond that, but that means he's got 2 years to figure out if he's going to be part of the window, and then if he's not, he's got 2 years left. Maybe he's a tradable asset at that point.
Right. And I'm not trying to jump too far into the offseason picture here, but
Yeah.
I was doing this today because you start to think about all the possibilities. You think about, to be honest with you, and I don't want to jump the gun on even another part of what we're actually going to talk about this week, but there are rumors all over the place about different players and things like that. And there was one that came out this morning that I went to just not look into, but like, my point is trying to find the fit for the player, because I'm looking and I'm like, I don't know, I can understand how it's viewed as an upgrade. That part I can see, but am I convinced there's a real fit here without something else, some other shoe falling or whatever? The more that I think about it, the more that I wonder how much they run this back from last year. Not for the sake of, we need to run it back because there's a chance with this team, but more from like here's an example. They have 11 forwards under contract right now, or under contract / that I'm expecting they get a contract. Let's just put it that way. And you can start at the top with the obvious ones: Konechny, Couturier, Tippett, Cates. Forrester got an extension. Okay, fine. Then you go into the ones that are starting to be like, okay, this is very short-term pieces here. Hathaway, Paling, Delorier. Brink's going to need another contract within the next 2 years. Michkov with a contract. Like, Michkov's obviously, like we said, key part, but one of those guys that will need a contract down the road. Rodrigo Abels had re-signed already earlier this year. He might be your fourth-line center if you ran it back.
Latvian Olympian
true.
Rodrigo Abels. I just
That
needed
is
to mention
true.
that since he came up here. Congratulations to Rodrigo Abels.
Good guy, by the way. Really nice guy. So it's awesome for him. And then
just needed to mention it. Okay.
And then Jacob Pelletier. That's the 11 forwards. And now you can fill that out from here with 12 and 13 or whatever you want to do with the combination of, and these are just guys who I either think are, these are combinations of guys who either played last year, even in the smallest capacity, like a game or two, or people who I think are on the radar at forward that, like, they're going to get a closer look. So this would be your Jet Lachenko. Is Lachenko ready or is he not? Are they keeping a space for him? It's Devin Kaplan. It's Carson Dorwart. It's Jacob Gaucher, who got into the lineup for a little bit last season. And it's also a guy like Alex Bump, who made some noise once he signed and got into the minors. Now you're waiting to see what camp brings, or at any point in time during the course of the next year. That is if they do nothing. No changes, pretty much just run it back. I'm sure it's a forward group that everybody would love to see if you want to talk Gavin McKenna, but you get my point. That is an option. You could theoretically do that. And in saying that you could do that, here's where I'm getting at with is that doesn't commit anything. You don't do any dollars, no term, no nothing for the next however long that you have to do it until you go to next offseason. Do you realize that with that grouping of players, if those are the grouping of players we're talking about for the course of the next season, that among them then through this season and next season, so we're now approaching the 27-28 season. Do you know how many of those forwards are under contract for that season? That's 2 full seasons from now. They play 2 more years.
4.
It is 4. It's Konechny, Couturier, Tippett, Cates.
Yep.
So then you shift to the defensive group. Sanheim, Ristolainen, Sealer, Drysdale, Zamula, Andre, York. That's your 7. Ristolainen's obviously going through an injury. He's going through a recovery during the offseason.
Yep.
So let's assume we're going to put 3 names behind that group of 7 that are ready to jump in potentially at any moment because they've either already played or been talked about highly, right? So I'm basically picking the bump of the defensive group with 2 others that have already been there. So Helge Grans, Adam Ginning, Hunter McDonald. That's 10 defensemen. Of the 10
It's a lot of defensemen.
I hear you. Of the 10 defensemen, only 2 of them are under contract going into the 27-28 season. Travis Sanheim and Nick Sealer.
That's a lot of movable defensemen, in theory.
It's not even about it being movable, because if your goal is just have money ready to spend, you don't need to do anything. To a degree.
Yeah, but you can trade Cam York.
Okay.
For example.
I was about to say, let's also be realistic. Cam York needs a contract, whether that is 2 years or less or 3 years or more remains to be seen. He could very well enter that number. It could go from 2 to 3. I believe, to me, this is where I'm coming from with this. I don't know if
Cam York for Marco Rossi, who says no.
Minnesota does.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Cam York and a 3rd for Marco Rossi.
They still say no.
Yeah, I know.
So I think the area where I was really trying to get with this also, when I look at that list of contracts or who needs them, is we've been focusing a lot on, what do you need to do? Not just what do you need to do, but when Michkov's next contract rolls around, thinking about what that could be or need to be, kind of where are you going to find the money with everything else that you need? And at least on the surface, if you're just talking from internal work, because they've already handled, to me, this is what I think has been really good about the Forrester Cates deals, is that you just took, basically, in my opinion, hold for whatever York gets. You just took your top 2 free RFAs in this case and signed them for a combined $7.75 million for at least 2 more years before, as you get into Michkov's next contract, but also as you try to build out the rest of this thing so you're ready to sign any of those guys. You realize that in 2 years' time, when Michkov needs a contract, the only RFAs that you're dealing with that really are significant at that point are going to be Forrester needs a contract, and next year the only really significant piece or 2 pieces that you have that are RFAs are Jamie Drysdale and Bobby Brink.
Okay.
It makes your internal work a lot tidier because you won't have to worry about that, especially if you can continue to potentially bridge some of those guys along. Maybe you're not maybe you're looking at Brink and going, Brink is not going to be part of the long-term future by the time next year rolls around.
Can I tell you something?
Go ahead.
You know what we're talking. You know what we've been talking about for, weeks at this point.
Sure.
We've been talking about that 2-year window. We've been talking about the fact that even already Danny Briere and Keith Jones might be kind of managing for their jobs a little
Mhm.
bit. I know it's early, but the rumblings, whatever, whatever.
Whatever.
We're talking about locking down future pieces on good deals in the relatively short term.
Right.
Cap going up $10 million a year over the next 3.
Essentially, yeah.
Danny's ready to do something big. I don't know if it's going to happen now. I don't know if it's going to happen this offseason or next offseason. Danny's preparing. Like there has to be something big coming. He is just clearing too much space to not have something in mind.
Well, and here's the interesting part, because everybody's going to go crazy over it's draft. Draft week is going to be upon us, and even though the draft isn't going to involve improving your team directly this season, there's a
Cam
lot of
York and
things.
Cam York and 6 for Jason Robertson.
If we want to believe Robertson's truly available when it comes down to it, I know what the rumors say.
would that improve your team next season?
Well, of course it would. No kidding. I'm not saying that. It's just we'll get into this when we start talking about other rumors on top
Okay.
of
Okay.
rumors upon rumors. But it's like, because I have my own thoughts on that, on all of that type of stuff. But like, I think there's a hunger right now for something to be done that's big, because you almost like what you want to see this offseason is proof that they're willing to go there, even if it's just one deal, one signing, one trade, one thing that improves the team with a little bit more of that high end talent you're looking for beyond the draft. Like, everybody wants to see the draft be the draft. Go and take your swings, get players that look like they're going to be key parts of the future, but it's still not going to change the outlook of this offseason. I think everybody's looking for one trade or one signing that says, it's like, to me, and this is a rumor we've already discussed, so I don't feel like we need to go over it too much, but it's why as soon as there was questions about Mitch Marner, there were people going crazy about, well, you've got to go for it, because you just want to see, but you want to see that one. I think people just want to see that one sign that you're serious about getting like,
The turn the corner signing.
sure, because if what people what it implies is that if you say we're satisfied, like there was the report that came out from Anthony DeMarco a few days ago about they're probably looking for stopgap options at center when it comes to free agency, because
Yep.
they've got this and this, and it was brought up along the lines of, yeah, they would be, of course they would like inquire about a Jason Robertson or JJ Peterka, let's just say, but if it involved doing something like Tyson Forrester in a deal, they think Forrester can be that too, so they want to see that through, blah, blah. And everybody looks and goes, but Jason Robertson's a 40-goal scorer. You don't want a 40-goal scorer? You're literally saying, I don't want a 40-goal scorer. That's what people are going to do. They're just going to go surface value. This guy scored 40 at one point. Forrester's got 25. Even if Forrester got to 35 over the next 2 seasons at some point, it doesn't matter where he's going, because you haven't seen it. You have no proof that that is going to completely be the case. And, it goes back to, kind of back toward the tail end of the Chuck Fletcher era, where I was talking about they would go into off seasons with hope. Oh, we hope Rasmus Ristolainen is going to be healthy all year. We hope that Sean Couturier's back is going to hold it, and then he's going to look like the player he once was. You can't hope. Now, this is a different kind of hope, because it's not hope of, well, this guy used to be this, and now I expect him to be that again after all of this. This is hope for, look at the progression of Tyson Forrester, 20 goals as a rookie, 25 in his second year. Is it logical to think that there's another step? Of course there is. He's 23 years old, and that's a total different type of hope. And you don't want to give up on prospects and young players too early.
Right.
But
That is
you're
just
also,
expecting progress. Right.
but you're expecting progress, and it's still, the hard part to convince other people of that, though, is that it's still a large gap between 40 and 25 as career
Well,
high
right.
numbers.
And what is the ceiling, right? Because
Sure.
you can score 20 for 10 years in a row and be a 20 goal scorer, and that's
Like,
totally fine. Or you can be a 20
sure.
goal scorer and then you take the next step.
Well, and this is the thing. Like, I saw a lot of comments related to that were along the lines of, this is exactly the type of thinking that has kept them where they are, standings wise, that they don't make the playoffs. And I like Forrester. Like, it's people agreeing, yeah, there's potential with Tyson Forrester, but I would also like not ignore the fact that if someone comes to the table with, I'm seriously thinking about moving a guy who has scored 40 goals in his career, you
You
know,
gotta consider it.
you've got to be a player, like,
Absolutely.
you know, I guess at this point we're talking enough about it. We should move on to some of these other ones. We've talked about other free agents. We already talked about both of these guys to an extent, but I'm just trying to move the line along here. But you get what, and obviously goaltending is a whole nother category. There's nobody locked up when we were talking about all those other, who's under contract 3 years from now and who's not. They don't have any which is actually a good thing. They don't have any long-term commitment to a goalie.
Fair enough.
To your point about doing something big, like, I just keep what I also keep coming back to is that the reason why I'm like more and more inclined to think this offseason is not necessarily the one is because of the fact that they still have 3 players under some form of salary retention of some kind. They're still paying toward, they're still paying. They retained on, they're still retaining on Kevin Hayes. They're still retaining on Scott Lawton next year after the trade at this trade deadline, and they still have the buyout of Cam Atkinson to get off the books. Those 3 things are off the books after next season, and now you have nothing. You have nothing holding you back,
Free insiders.
because like your focus is on the cap goes up another 8.5 million next year at least. We don't even know if that's confirmed.
Correct.
We do, we don't, but we don't, right? Like, it should be at
Confirmed to go up
least,
at least that
right.
much.
It's at least that. It could be more. I mean, they've talked about that. You're adding in at least about $7 million between those 3 players that are coming off of your books, and that's a given number that it comes off the books. We know what that number is, and you are also, I'm going 2-3 years down the line, but one of the other key pieces of this is that I believe it's next year, like the 25-26 season, so this upcoming season, and 26-27, and you're done worrying about Ryan Ellis.
Okay. Well,
Those 4 things I think are still the roadblocks here. And you got to remember who's, you got to kind of remember, and this is where I try to give Danny Briere some leeway here. Whose mess is he cleaning up with this? Kevin Hayes is Chuck Fletcher's mess. Cam Atkinson is Chuck Fletcher's mess. Ryan Ellis is Chuck Fletcher's mess. Retaining on Lawton is the only thing that Danny Briere has done among those retention deals, that he made the deal and did it, and it got you a first-round pick. So you understand why Briere went for it.
absolutely. Not a prospect. And I understand that. And there's 2 things that do lean me in that direction as well, right? You have the 2026 free agency class, which obviously they haven't had a chance to sign extensions yet, and a lot of them will be off the market, but there are still expected to be some amount of names that make it. Um, Connor McDavid, I assume, won't make it, but you never know. And also Gavin McKenna being in the draft next year. So that does lead me in the direction of, not really doing a whole lot this offseason, staying in that lower tier in the NHL, being in that lottery range, maybe in that 5 to 10 range, and hoping you get a lottery spot. But but then there's the other part of me that says, yeah, the cap's going to jump another, $8.5, $9 million next year at least, and you have all that dead money coming off the books. And right now, you have $19 million with Cam York and Jacob Pelletier to sign. They're not taking all that much. If Cam York signs here, it's going to be a short bridge-ish deal. I imagine somewhere in the 5 or 6 range at the most. Jacob Pelletier probably in the 2, 3, 4 range at a pretty low amount of money as well. So you're going to have $10+ million this offseason with all that money still coming off next year. So
Right.
it may make sense if something is available now, a Jason Robertson, and you can get him for 9 or whatever, right? Because obviously you have to have a contract extension in place to give up the assets necessary to get him.
Right.
Plus, you're probably trading money out the door in a Forrest or a Tippett or whoever goes the other way in that deal.
And that's exactly the thing, right? Like,
I think it
it,
makes sense to do something this year if it becomes available.
exactly. And it just depends on what that something is, you know. There are names floating out there that I don't actually think are available. There are names floating out there that I think are, but are going to be really tough to pry away. You know, that I think the Flyers would walk away from those deals potentially. Well,
JJ Paterka, or do you
here,
think he's an attainable name? Because I would be interested, frankly.
the problem is, okay, one of the big problems, and this is going to go for both the free agent market and the trade market, is there are a lot of names floated around that people immediately jump because they theoretically have C next to their name in terms of playing center that are both. They're Noah Cates essentially, not in talent level, but they play both. And sometimes the numbers that you see production wise go more with the wing play than the center play. So you're like, you just think you're going to plug Jason Robertson in at center and
No,
think,
no, 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 no.
no. But some people do. Or you think that
Right.
JJ Paterka, you're going to plug him in at center and he's going to continue to grow when he played wing a lot more. And that's probably where the numbers go. You know,
I do think he is more of a center, certainly than Jason Robertson, though.
well, sure, Robertson I think is just straight up a winger, but like there's people who think that that can stop. You know, it's either it's one or the other. They either think that the guy's going to just naturally shift to center and play center, and that's going to be the way that it is, or that by adding more wingers like that, that you're going to eventually make your center position be less of a need because you should be able to stick anybody there, and it turns out to be productive. You know, it's one or the other, and I just don't see the need to. Let's assume they have $10 million left after signing. uh, Let's put it this way, like, think about this. Whatever York makes, and let's call it the 6 mil. Like the last number I saw was something along the lines of 6.25, like Sanheim's getting. Which years down the line, if you sign that deal, it feels like less than what he would actually asked for based on usage. But
Well, if you're doing the length, yeah, for sure. But
well,
is he
sure.
signing a longer term extension at
Well,
this
right. You're
point?
not. Look, no, they're not going to sign him for 6.25 for 2 years. They're going
Well,
to.
that's what I mean,
If you're doing
right?
that, you're looking at 4 or 5 easy.
It's got to be.
Right. Um, what I'm looking at though with that is that I'm saying, okay, so even if like put York above the $6 million mark, put Pelletier at between, you know, at 1 to 2-ish million, like something in that wide range of a number, because it's not going to be tons of experience, and take whatever's left, say 10 to, you know, somewhere in the range of 10 to 12 million dollars,
Yeah.
and assume they go out and do the one thing that I think that everybody kind of feels like is coming, which is that they sign a goalie of some kind,
Okay.
just to add another person, because they have nothing. They've got right now, they've got Sam Harrison. Fedotov is still on the books and would be part of the picture, but you don't know what the situation, you know, firmly anyway. Nobody knows exactly what the situation with Kolosov is again. And now you have nobody behind Kolosov other than Carson Bjarnason, who is just turning pro. He is not going to be on the NHL radar. So you need another NHL radar guy.
For the record, I think I do know the situation with Kolosov.
Well, I think that's what everybody would like for it to be. I think the hard part is that the team he was playing for in the KHL has moved on themselves and been like, well, we need goalies, so we're signing this guy and this guy and this guy, and their situation is pretty good. So the problem is that the rights are tied up. The Flyers have the rights. It's the only thing you could do is trade him. That's really the only way you're really saying goodbye to him, other than finding another team to loan him to. And it's, again, you know, I'm so tired of talking about him because of the fact that there's so much, that's not resolved. So I don't even need to get in there with that. Like, I just think that they're going to spend money on a goalie of some kind because they have to. Like, right now, as far as I'm concerned, if that's your answer to Kolosov, is that he's not part of the picture anymore eventually, I look at the situation and I go, then they've got Erison, they've got Fedotov. They're going to need somebody else who challenges Fedotov in some capacity. And you've got Bjarnason and the minors who need somebody with some form of pro experience with him.
And maybe there's another goalie floating around in somebody's system that you can swap um Kolosov for, right? Like maybe there's a Michael DiPietro that you can swap him for somewhere
Yeah.
and give somebody a fresh change of scenery. And listen, I'm not saying that's a high percentage play, but maybe. you can get an asset for him somewhere in
And
a similar change of scenery type of swap. But
see,
no, I cannot see a future for him with the organization at this point.
here's the problem. I think by now everybody knows what he wants, which is play me effective immediately at the NHL level,
Right.
and nobody's going to take that then. Like, who would
No.
take his rights to have him there being like, well, I'm either up or I don't want to be here. So you're not, then at that point, you might as well loan him twice and then say, see you later, or come to terms with a conditional buyout of some kind or something like that, which just is a whole big waste of time and all that type of stuff. But anyway,
You know who I'd love? You know who I'd love to see the Flyers approach in free agency?
go ahead.
Ilya Samsonov.
Okay, see, and that's an interesting name. That's more okay.
Experience in a tandem, solid guy. Vegas may not be retaining him at this point just because money is always tight. So their backup goalie is a spinning wheel.
There's a tier level with this to me though, because like if you're gonna go there, that immediately to me signals Ivan Fedotov's getting sent down.
Yeah,
right out of the gate. And I know a lot of people would like that. I'm saying I wonder if the cost of that though, like the cost of the goalie that's going to just immediately warrant that is going to be too much or too much term for what you're trying to do long term. Like, I don't think they want to sign a goalie for more than 2 years. I can see you finding a way to approach David Riddick and say, here's a 2-year deal for like $2 million. Want to come play?
Samsonov's coming off a 2-year deal making 1.8 per, I think. Hold on, I'm looking at this. Hold on.
I thought he was making a little more than that, but
he was making 1.8.
Okay.
I'm taking a look at his page now.
But he's going to want more.
Well, sure, but like, what do you give him? 3? He's been okay in Vegas. Like, he wasn't world beating. He was fine.
I just worry that he's going to want like Fedotov's cap hit, which is 3.275, which is it's totally acceptable.
So you're okay, right?
I don't think he's going to want 2. That's the problem.
I don't know, dude. He's been the B guy in a tandem for the last 6 years. Like, when he was the A guy in Toronto, they weren't great. They went back and forth in the goalies. Like, I don't know. He hasn't really been an A guy at the NHL level, and like respectfully, and like, I think at this point he would accept a contract for that kind of money, which only a mid to lower tier team is going to be able to give him at this point, because only a mid to lower tier team is going to be able to afford that, to pay that as a starting goalie. I don't know, man. I think he would accept it. I think it's at least reasonable.
I mean, I do the deal in a second if it's for a year or 2, obviously.
Yeah. I would go to 3. I'm not thrilled about it, and as long as there's no trade protection, I'm okay with it. But I would go to 3.
And the only reason I'm hesitant on a 3rd year is because of the fact that at that point in time, am I talking about Zavergan or Bjarnason?
Yeah, but
2 full years
at that point.
No, I know. No, I'm talking about for playing time though.
Right, but yeah, what I'm saying is he's making 4 or 5, and they're both still going to be on their ELCs at that point. I don't think it's a problem.
It's not a cap. Yeah, it's not a cap problem.
Right.
Yeah, but it's not like he might be waivable, but it's not. See, I wouldn't want to even go down that road if that's what you're thinking.
With 1 year left, you trade him.
No,
like again, as long as there's no trade protection. Like,
well, the only other area where you can get away with that then is if you go 3 years, Erisson's up before then, and maybe you sour on Erisson before then, and you say that's the guy you're moving on from. That's the only other solution,
and that's totally viable,
right?
Or you sign him to this deal and you say, okay, help us out for 2 years, and if we're in a position to win, you get to be the B guy for a winning team again, like you've done before. If you're not, we'll trade you to a contender. We'll let you go be the B guy somewhere. We'll whatever we got to do. Again, just you can trade him out of town if the crease is too full. But let's be so incredibly for real. In the Philadelphia Flyers history, when has the crease ever been too full?
Well, no, and and listen, without jumping the gun on what you were talking about again with the draft stuff. I think there's another goalie in the conversation by the time next weekend is over. And
do you know why that is? Because none of the guys that they have proven themselves yet. They
Not that
rotated
aren't
three guys.
not that aren't 19 years old anyway.
Three guys got games this past year. Any one of them could have grabbed the net. They all have the potential to grab the net. None of them did it.
Sure, well, that's why I'm saying you're fixated on two 19-year-olds and possibly an 18-year-old if you draft one.
And I'm not fixated on any of that.
No.
My
No.
future is
I'm saying as
right.
an organization though.
Right,
It's
absolutely.
why you entertain right now. Your entire goalie conversation is, yeah, it's a problem. We got two 19-year-olds and we got to keep bringing them along, but that's about it.
And that's why I'm fine with signing Vitek Vanacek for 3, or I'm sorry, not Vitek Vanacek, Ilya Samsonov for 3 years, because
You got to give
you
something a
know
shot.
how many NHL games does he have? How many games do Carson
Samsonov?
Bjarnason? How many games do Carson Bjarnason and Zavagan have?
Well, obviously
Okay,
none because they're
that's what
19.
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying he is here forever, lock it in, blah blah blah. I'm willing to fire him off to the sun, fire him into the sun in 2 years if it's not working out. But in the meantime, I would like a guy.
I didn't realize
Who,
Samsonov had such a round number for games. It's games played,
how
not
many is it?
started. He's
Yeah,
played
yeah,
in
yeah.
200 games.
Hello, triple digits, 200 games.
200
Probably,
games,
probably in
200
the neighborhood of 175 starts,
188.
188 starts.
Oh,
Okay.
no, but here's the part that's intriguing, and of course he's played on like the years in Toronto. And remember, these are regular season numbers more than postseason,
Well, yeah,
obvious.
it was in Toronto. Of course they are.
But you're talking about
Sorry.
you're talking about a year where Washington would have still been really good in 21, 22. Like they were, I know they were this past year too, but like they had a couple years where it was like borderline playoffs. The one year they missed, right? Like didn't ever,
Yep.
it was the 23 was the first year that both Pittsburgh and Washington missed since 06.
Something like that. It was
And,
crazy. Yeah.
and then Washington got back in 24. And obviously they were there in this year in 25.
Yep.
But when he was in Washington, like he had a couple years where there were some really good, and actually he had a couple years where the record looked really good, but the numbers didn't necessarily. Like his last year in Washington, he had a 23-12-5 record in 44 games, 302 goals against, 896 save percentage. Those technically are below average numbers for league average. He goes to Toronto, 27-10-5 in the first year in Toronto. That would be what? A 233 goals against is outstanding, and a 919 is outstanding. That was the first year in Toronto. Then the next year in Toronto was a 23-7-8 record, again outstanding record, but a 313 goals against and an 890 save percentage. And then this past year with Vegas, he had a 16-9-4 record, which actually is a lot closer to 500 at that point, and a 500 in terms of total wins and total losses, not hockey 500. And a little bit, better goals against 282, but the save percentage was basically the same as the last year in Toronto. It was an 891.
Yeah, dude, and that's as Vegas's backup. You're like, who are you playing against as Vegas's backup? You're playing against the worst teams in the league for the most part. Like, I'm not looking up who his starts were against, but I imagine you're not playing against top tier teams every night.
And I'm gonna take that a totally different direction, because I'm sitting here going, it's not just about playing against some of the worst teams as like the backup to to Aiden Hill or whatever the case may be. I'm looking at that's playing behind Vegas's defense. That's playing behind Alex Pietrangelo and Shea Theodore, and like you don't have that here.
Yeah, it turns out an injured Rasmus Ristolainen and Nick Seeler don't exactly live up to that same caliber.
Like just for comparison's sake here, and this is a guy. So, and this is why I would entertain some of these numbers to a degree. What did everybody say about Dustin Wolf in Calgary?
Yeah.
That he basically could have, like, he came close enough. He was second place in Calder voting. Why? Because they had nothing else. Their offense was not the strong suit of it. It was, he kept them in so many games. They almost made the playoffs because of it.
He was bailing them out every night. Absolutely.
Okay, so not that it was a big number, but for 29 starts in 30 games, Dan Vladar had to play with the same team in front of him that doesn't score a lot of goals. So you need to be really good if you're going to win. He had a 12-11-6 record with that team, a 280 goals against and an 898 save percentage. And I could see that translating better to the same makeup of the Flyers than Samsonov playing behind what Vegas has and still having lesser numbers than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree. But
That's all I'm saying. Like I was trying to pick, like, you could theoretically do the same thing for Jake Allen, who's probably the biggest name on the market. I've seen Jake
Ugh,
Allen,
he's
um,
so old though.
but as a stopgap, as a 1 year stopgap.
It's got to be. It's if it's okay. If it's two, it's got to be a real nice number.
I think there's a way it could be. Like, I think for a guy who might just want to keep playing, it could be 2 and 1.5.
That it's got to be. And
Right.
at that point, like the
And I think
Brian Elliott deal, I'm fine with it.
right. Well, and I think someone's going to overpay for him. So you're trying to look at more like the other part of the equation is obviously with some of the rumors that are out there is trading for a goalie also. And like one of the names,
Yeah,
availability. Well, because what's one of the first names that comes up, and I'm not talking about the one that we have already previously probably talked about because of all the connections at this point.
You're not talking about John Gibson, are you?
Yeah, I am, and I'm sitting there, and the
Okay.
first thing that comes to my mind is oh great, an injury-prone goalie that they're going to have to trade for, pay a ton to trade for, and then you still have to deal with whatever the cap hit is for that one. I think it's for one more year, right?
Hey, remember when the Flyers got Steve Mason? Okay, now imagine they did that, but he's 4 years older. Like, and listen, I was a Steve Mason defender on this show.
I am too, because people don't realize
Steve Mason
people
defender.
do not realize how was he great, like elite? No, but was he as bad as people made him out to be? Absolutely not. He was not near as bad as people made him out to be.
You can go back
not when you watch Ivan Fedotov and Alexei Kolosov.
You can go back to the early days of this podcast, which I do not know if they exist on the internet. I think they're on Podbean.
I think they are.
And you can hear me, a staunch defender in a bad staticky mic, of Stone Cold Steve Mason, because he deserved so much better than the defense in front of him, including Andre Mazzaros and Andrew
McDonald.
Bleeping McDonald.
How did I know that was the name? How did I know?
Hello, because
anyway,
what other names are there?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, okay, moving on here a little bit. We do have some assistant coaches here.
Yes. Ready to have some fun with this, because
okay,
we were doing this before the show.
We did a little practicing on these names here, and I'm almost 100% confident. Okay, so Jay Varady, I feel pretty good about that one.
Yes.
And then we have Yaroslav Saykovsky, I think is what they're telling us.
That's what we've been told. Is
it's
Saykovsky.
It's one of Saykovsky, or Sveshkovsky. They're telling us Saykovsky.
If you were just reading it, you're going to say Sveshkovsky. If you just read it and tried to essentially phonetically pronounce it,
if you want to do Americanly pronounce it.
Saykovsky is what we've been told.
Okay. And I assume that someone will say it in, one of the earlier media availabilities once camp starts, and we'll get an introduction.
No, you know what's going to happen? Nobody's ever going to say it, just like nobody's ever going to call him Yaroslav either.
Okay.
His nickname is Yogi. Everybody's just going to, which cracked me up, by the way, because I'm sitting here going, because this is supposedly, he's going to be the guy who runs the power play. They haven't given out roles completely, but supposedly he's going to run the power play, because that's what he has, Saykovsky's come up through this, like, kind of that ranking of almost to not being on a coaching staff in general. He was a skills coach first. So if you're trying to do a parallel here, take the job that Angelo Ricci had, who just got let go by the Flyers. Take his job, elevate him to being an actual part of the assistant coaching staff, which is what they did just this past season. And that was Rick Tocchet, who put him on that staff, and go from there. Like, he was an assistant coach there, and once the move happened, once Tocchet left Vancouver and was headed to Philadelphia, this is what followed. And we did this, right? This is what we were trying to do last time we had a conversation about assistant coaches, and kind of we're trying to piece together. We got to find connections.
Yep.
Now on the other side, there's no connection, as far as I know, anyway, right?
Yeah, I have no idea. Are you talking about Varady?
Yeah, like with Varady,
he worked under Tocchet in Arizona.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yes, there was one.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't think he was too high. Actually, you know how he worked under Tocchet? He was coaching the AHL team, and there was kind of stoppages, if you will, because it was during COVID time. So the AHL wasn't playing actively, I guess, and he joined Arizona staff for that season.
I gotta ask you, Kevin, though. I
Yeah.
know they haven't like officially announced who's doing what yet, but who's not running the penalty kill?
What do you mean?
It,
Who's not running the penalty kill?
is Rocky Thompson not running the penalty kill?
Oh, you mean
Not
the
running the
power
power
play?
play?
You
I'm
mean the
sorry, the
power play?
power play is.
Yes.
Oh,
No,
it's a deep sigh
okay,
of
but see, this is
relief. It's a
this
deep
is what
breath
made
of
me
fresh
this is what made
air.
me laugh about the whole thing, right? Like I said, no one's gonna call him Yaroslav or anything like that. It's just gonna be Yogi. When we refer to the power play coach, it's gonna be
Went
Yogi, right?
from
We went
Rocky
from
to
Rocky
Yogi.
to Yogi.
That is really funny.
You know what I'm saying?
Uh,
Like it's all these nicknames and things like that.
well, I mean, yeah, hello.
Whatever.
Have you spent 5 minutes around a hockey player?
Okay,
It
but
is
I'm
all nicknames all the time.
okay. I get it. I'm talking about that sub in for you're just going to refer to them by that in terms of it doesn't like it's what I mean. It's one thing for
Yeah.
us to sit there and go, okay, like Garnet Hathaway is Garney. You
Okay.
know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, I get it. I know where you got that from. You just put a Y on the end of something.
Yogi's
It's
completely out of nowhere,
right,
though.
like exactly. It's just something different. That's all. Anyway.
Yeah.
And the thing is, okay, with the role thing, by the way. So this isn't like because it was easy. It's very easy to look and say, here comes the press release. Here's 2 assistant coaches. That's it. It's over. That's the assistant coaching search.
We're
No,
done.
apparently there's going to be another one
Okay.
somewhere coming down the line. There's going to be a 3rd assistant coach with a role to be determined.
Okay. I almost wonder if that's where. Okay. I'm gonna throw a name out there
Go ahead.
who has floated around in a similar sphere before. If he doesn't get called for the job, probably most likely in Dallas, I wonder if
Well,
that's
that's
what Jay
what's left.
Woodcroft does. I wonder if that's what Jay Woodcroft does this year.
No, Jay Woodcroft is not apparently in the running for anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I wonder if since he's not in the running for a head coaching job, if he comes in as an assistant,
No, 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 no. I'm talking
oh,
about
he's
I'm
completely out. Okay,
I'm saying he's not on the no. So
he,
that's what
he's
this
waiting to
is
take a job in November.
quite possibly. And see that's the thing, right? Like when you're an ex-head coach and sometimes you just don't want to do this. You don't want to take the step back and be an assistant anywhere because maybe because also you're sitting there thinking the turnaround happens so quickly. I'll just get a call, you
Yeah,
know. And maybe to a degree teams aren't interested for the same reason. If you're
sure.
already thinking about the next job 3 months out, why would we hire you? You know what I mean? And in fairness, Jay Woodcroft was the first name I thought of when the Dallas vacancy happened.
Me too.
The
Because
first name.
I thought it would have made a lot of sense, especially with Edmonton as the adversary. It's pretty funny.
Well, and think about it, there was a lot of talk about this because at the time we did our last show, we were speculating on if that was going to happen because it seemed like it was trending that way, and then it did. But ironically, it didn't come out or wasn't made official anyway until after Pittsburgh makes their hiring announcement and Boston makes theirs. So Pete DeBoer is out there now with no other
Oh,
openings because
they hung him out to dry.
I mean, how long
They
has it been? What was it? Pete DeBoer's been behind a bench in the NHL for what? It's been like he's been coaching like something like 20 some odd years straight also, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, barring a disastrous Mike Babcock Columbus situation where somebody gets
Right.
fired in the
Six,
preseason,
16
I
straight years.
I don't think Pete DeBoer is going to be on the bench to start a season. Now, that being said, the first head coaching vacancy that comes up, he is immediately in the top 3 favorites for it, no matter what.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, and just think about this. He's coached for 16 straight years. Okay. Usually when a coach gets his first job, it's not glamorous. You're not going straight to, not glamorous in one of 2 ways. You're either not going to the premier franchise by identity in terms of like it's the Montreal Canadiens, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's the New York Rangers, or you're not going to the team that is competing right away, one or the other. So his first job was Florida during the lean years, right? Like, then he goes to New Jersey. New Jersey's in the Stanley Cup Final his first year as head coach. So right away, you're in a team built to potentially do something, right?
A little bit, yeah.
He goes to San Jose. First year with San Jose, they're in the Stanley Cup Final.
Insane. Remember when Pete DeBoer could win conference finals?
Well, sure.
Sorry.
He jumps in to finish out a year. And so after start, and this is to your point exactly. He started the one season with San Jose and closed out the same season with Vegas after a coaching change was made. So there you go. Now with Vegas, he came again. They came close a couple of times, right? Like he was out the year before they won the cup.
Crazy.
And then he goes to Dallas, and in Dallas, we all know the story by now. It's 3 years in a row of conference finals.
Man, and if they didn't fire him, they would have had a civil war in that hockey ops department between players and staff and coaches, and it was about to get real ugly.
Like after making the conference or making the Stanley Cup Final in his first year with San Jose, the next year they lost in the first round in 6 games. The year after, they won. They made it to the second round before losing.
Yep.
The year after that, they won 2 rounds. They were in the conference finals in 18-19. He's 20 games in the playoffs, 10 wins. So they got to the conference final. Yep. 19-20 conference final with Vegas, because that's 12 wins. They got to. Well, actually, no, 12 wins. That's not Stanley Cup Final.
12 wins get you to the Cup Final, and you get swept in the Cup Final?
No, something doesn't add up there.
Something's off.
It's got 20 games in the playoffs, 12-8 record.
That can't be right.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. That's 19-20 bubble. So qualifying round. So they won
best of 5.
So it was still second round.
So that was the qualifying round is technically not considered a playoff round. So that is
either that or was Vegas one of the teams that played round robin, and they might have won a couple of games.
They definitely would have been.
I'd have to go look at that year specifically. Actually, I'll just. Okay.
Oh God, are we looking at bubble stats? Hell yeah.
No, I got it. Vegas was 3-0 in round robin games, which means they would have emerged as the number 1 seed.
Yep.
1-5 against Chicago in the first round, 1-7 against Vancouver in the second round.
That's 12.
Lost the conference finals in 5. So it was
okay.
So it was 4 wins and 4 wins in the 2 playoff rounds, 3 round robin wins, and 1 win in a conference final. So they were in the conference finals again.
So they're counting the round robin wins as postseason wins. That's stupid.
I hear
that's stupid.
Okay,
they had 9 playoff wins.
Okay,
got it.
Guess how many? Guess where they made it again in 2020-21.
The conference finals.
The conference finals, because they played 19 games. They won 10 of them. So 10 wins means you were in the middle of the conference final. That would have been the year they lost to Montreal.
Oh yeah. Okay. That was fun.
Then they actually missed the playoffs in 21-22, which is why he was out in Vegas. And then you've got the same situation. 10, 10, and 9 are the win totals in Dallas in the playoffs for the last 3 years. So he's always there, but you get my point. It's just one of those things where it's like, now he doesn't have a place to particularly go. Woodcroft was the first name I thought of. I'm still holding out for, and the only reason I'm not holding out for, but I'm still thinking that Luke Richardson's going to have something to do with this team moving forward. And
I think it's pretty likely.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I'm really believing it is because that rumor came out somewhere a few weeks back, right, when they were talking about, okay, Tockett's got the job. Now they got to think about assistant coaches, all that type of stuff, right? And every year in August, the Flyers do an alumni fantasy camp. And all of a sudden, couldn't have been a week after Tocchet. And it's not even like it was a week after Tocchet was hired and Rick Tockett's going to be part of the coaches for this fantasy camp thing. No. It's Luke Richardson got added.
Interesting.
And I don't recall Luke Richardson having much to do with Flyers alumni events. And granted, of course not while you're coaching Chicago and all that
Mm.
stuff like that. But he hasn't been coaching Chicago for a little bit now. And it's not like he's come back for some of these other things and all of a sudden he's going to be around in August, right before camp starts.
Interesting. Right.
You know what I mean? Just that's all I'm saying. I don't know if that means anything. It just is interesting. Could be somebody else, could be somebody totally different.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have any more Flyers news, or can we finally do
Um,
what? Or do we finally?
I
Or can
threw
we
this.
finally
I
do it?
threw this up there really quick. The rumor thing. It's more or less what I want to address is that because you've already brought up Robertson, we brought up Paterka, we've brought up you brought up Rossi, like all these people that they've been linked to. And I'll add to this, by the way. So Shabanov was, geez, now by this point it had to be almost 2 weeks ago at this point that it was brought up, and essentially a Russian outlet jumped the gun a little bit, made it sound like he was signing. That's not necessarily the case. Now there's a lot of talk about some of these players in the KHL who are possibly going to come to the NHL that are kind of waiting some things out. I guess more or less to see where certain things happen, what goes on, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you saw the crazy stuff that I think it was Moscow said about Ivan Demidov, right? The president or GM or whoever runs the team, you know how those KHL teams are,
Mm-hmm.
uh, came out and was like, "Oh yeah, it would be really nice if we just had Demidov back for the year, and then he can come back to the NHL after the KHL season's over. But
Right, like
it'd be really nice if we just had him for the playoffs and stuff." Hello, um,
right.
but anyway, in case you're not familiar with Shabanov, he is 5'8", but reported at 5'8", 157 pounds, so not exactly the largest man in
No,
the NHL.
very skilled forward,
Yep,
very good
24
numbers
years
and
old.
very good numbers in the KHL. Very much fits all that type of stuff like that.
Yes.
The
Point per
one,
game in the KHL this
the
year, which is impressive in that league.
absolutely the one catch is what typically is the catch with this type of stuff. It's the same conversation that we theoretically were having with Kolosov, which is the
PO politics.
no. It's this conversation that's had, or this belief in the KHL that they are the second best league for everything, and
Right.
going over to North America only to play in the minor leagues doesn't add up. So
Isn't
you don't want that.
right.
So essentially, one of the key things here would be, okay, yes, Shabanov in Philadelphia, possibility for sure, but are you giving him one of the roster spots right away
And he's
and
another
saying that
guy
you're uncertain?
And he's another guy that you were kind of talking about earlier, where he's listed as a center slash winger. And,
Well, and here's the thing,
how many people look at that and see center and go, ooh, where
well,
he's
I never viewed him
probably
as
a winger in
I
the
never I
NHL.
never really viewed him as a center. I'm sure it says that to a degree, but like to
Right.
me, everything I saw was more or less listing him as a winger. The big, and listen, there's no risk to something like this. Like if you want to go this direction, you want to sign a guy at 24 years old to a 1-year entry level deal at 800K or whatever it is to see if it's a fit. Be my guest. That's exactly where you are as a franchise right now. But
In a year where you're not making a playoff push, more than
right, like I
likely.
don't care. Like right away, like you brought up the size thing, and it's like I don't care what his size is. This isn't
No, me
drafting
neither.
a guy that you want to have here for 10 years. This is a guy who you give a 1-year essentially tryout to, and
If
you
you're
see a
worried about
bunch
his
of things.
size, put him with Garnet Hathaway.
Well,
I'm not worried about it.
and you try a bunch of things. You could try him with Michkov at 5-on-5. I mean, you can see
I assume they will.
you can see how he would be effective on a power play. You can see if he works with anybody else. Like you got a lot of options with that. It's just again, it kind of goes back to this idea that everything that is said, you never know where it's coming from to a degree. Like I'm seeing this happen a lot with the draft stuff too. Like, okay, that's another thing that happened. I didn't really create anything for it, but I'll just touch on it really quickly. They had their typical pre-draft press conference this week. Danny Briere and Brent Flair did. And they said a lot of the typical stuff, best player available at 6, blah, 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 that type of stuff. But there was a lot of, like right away, Snow the goalie was talking about like, oh, what if they trade back from 6? And you could see, the internet just blew up with that one, like, oh, trade back from 6, and be, and even if I don't believe they're going to do that. And even if it's not that big of a possibility, I'm not discounting the possibility doesn't exist, and I'm not discounting the fact that somebody like Anthony Sanfilippo, who's going to say something on that show, wasn't given accurate information from somebody who wanted to pass information along of some kind. Whether that's exactly what they follow through with or not isn't the point. It's where it's the source of the information. When people tell you are the Flyers not interested in Marco Rossi, or is that an agent telling you that? Or another team telling you that? Or you know what I mean? How do you know exactly where it comes from? Did Danny Briere come out and tell you we're not talking about this guy? No, and they won't do that. So until you actually see what ends up with anything,
Well,
you got
and
to hold on it a little bit. I know it's concerning to hear things like we may not be looking at this, or
sure. And what's Danny gonna say? Is he gonna come out and go, "Yep, we are openly negotiating for Jason Robertson, and their current price is they want a first and Cam York, and we want to
well, like
offer." Like he's not gonna come out and do that. And
I'll do,
he didn't do that
and
around the Frost and Farabee trades. He didn't do that around the Cutter Gauthier trade. That's not how Danny Briere has operated as a
I'll
general
do you one
manager.
better, and I'll do you one better. And this is a little tie into the draft, and we'll talk more about it next week. But like their supposed primary target at 6 is Caleb Desnoyers.
Right. If
Okay,
he's
that's
there.
fine. That is supposed. Now, why would anybody say that doesn't have a tie to the organization, or
Well,
with
right.
having no tie to the organization? Somebody in the organization is not going to sit there and go, "Oh yeah, it for us it's Caleb Desnoyers at 6. That's who we want." And you can be putting up a smokescreen for everybody in the league that, like, there was a line, I think it was Brent Flair who said it, or maybe Danny was the one who said it. I don't really remember, but somebody brought up we're comfortable, like basically explaining that they're comfortable in that spot. That when the Briere said the night that they found out they dropped 2 spots from 4 to 6, he was bummed about it, and then now now they look at it and they're not as much anymore because they feel like they're getting a good player. He basically, one of the two of them followed it up with something along the lines of, everything else that happens is going to dictate who we pick. Like, we might not have to think too much about this
Yeah. Hi.
because,
Hello. Spoiler for our draft preview show. If James Higgins is there at 6, you take him and run. Thank you.
but here's the thing. There's no indication anywhere that they're even remotely interested in Higgins.
Okay.
Now, is that all? Now,
Was there interest that they were was there word out there that they were interested in Jamie Drysdale?
well,
Jacob
that's different.
Pelletier?
Well, that's different though. Those are trade conversations, and you could be talking with a
Sure.
bunch of different teams about what they have
We know
versus
how
what's
Danny
out there.
Briere operates.
Well, sure, and that's my point. You can be saying we really like, you're not saying, but you can kind of focus in on Desnoyers, or even be more conservative and focus in on Jake O'Brien because you think he's going to be there, and more or less what you're.
Or even a Porter Martone, I know is a name I've seen in some mocks. But again, he's a winger, and that's a whole different debate.
Well, it doesn't matter because I think if Martone made it to 6, I think that's, again, that's kind of like Michkov to a degree. You might want to take a
I
swing on a guy of that talent.
I agree, and we can talk about that more in our draft
It's
show.
just
Absolutely.
my point is just that saying something like that has a little there's a little bit of a correlation between something like that and something like Michkov to a degree, where it's like, we don't expect anything. I'm sure they're sitting there
Absolutely.
looking, like, Desnoyers been projected top 5 in different mocks. I'm sure they're sitting there thinking, probably not going to be him, and it's probably not going to be Higgins, but we'll see what happens when 6 rolls around. And then
And
figure it out. I'm with you
Greg,
on the Higgins. I'm with you on Higgins.
Greg Button has James Higgins slipping to 8, and that's insanity. But anyway,
Well, and what else did Danny Briere say about this too? Danny Briere basically, in no certain terms, essentially was like, with all due respect to, and without mentioning names, but with all due respect to Craig Button or Bob McKenzie or all of these other people out there, yeah, and outlets who put out, here's the prospect rankings, here's the prospect rankings, here's the top 50, here's the top 100, whatever it may be. And the top 10s all look a little different, right? Except for maybe 1 and 2, but they all look a little different. And Briere's sitting there going, essentially, with all due respect, I'm trusting the guy. It's a little anti-Hextall.
Right.
I'm trusting the scouts who go and do 100 reports on these guys. Then I'll
Right.
make a decision based off of those guys, not what the guy on TV has to say, So
Yeah. And we will indeed do a little bit more on the draft in next week's show that is a little bit more draft preview oriented. So,
sure.
all right. Is there any more Flyers news, or can we
No, I
finally
think
do
we're
what
going to
Pete?
move on.
Or can we finally do what Pete DeBoer can't and move on to the Stanley Cup Final?
Oh,
Boom.
well, he
Okay.
has
I
twice.
I know, not recently. Okay, so I really hate to say this.
Mm-hmm.
I really legitimately hate to say this. The Stanley Cup stays in Florida.
Okay.
2 years in a row. The Florida Panthers are the Stanley Cup champions. That's it. That's the part that I hate to say, to be completely honest. Um, it just feels, ugh, ugh. You know, as a professional wrestling fan, something I've talked about on the show many times. It's like when the heel wins. It's like when the bad guy wins. It just, oh, I hate them so much, dude. I really do.
Okay. That's not where I expected the conversation to start.
And like, I mentioned before this series started that it would be good for the game if Connor McDavid, and to a lesser extent Leon Draisaitl, were to get their hands on the Stanley Cup.
Okay.
So I think this is unfortunate for the game. I also think it's unfortunate that it happened in 6 because obviously who doesn't want Stanley Cup Final Game 7?
In Edmonton, no less.
Right, exactly. That being said, it is undoubtable that the Florida Panthers are the best team. As long as they get into the playoffs, they are the best team in the league. Because when it comes to the playoffs, they just kill you. Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally.
All
It's,
of the above.
right. Sometimes they give you potentially lifelong injuries. We have a Roman Yossi Potts diagnosis, which may or may not come from Sam Bennett. We have Anthony Stolarz throwing up on the bench after getting elbowed in the face.
Yeah.
You know, but they win in the Stanley Cup. And when it comes to the playoffs, what do we always say? The rule book goes out the window. And who does that better than the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, evidenced by the number of power plays in Game 6.
Sorry, what number of power plays in Game 6? There were none.
Right, 0.
Hello? Because 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 the referees don't want to decide a game.
No, but hang on. No, hold on a minute. The bigger problem.
Legalizing murder decides the game, my dude.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't think there was anything egregious in Game 6 per se. Like there were penalties that could have been called, but I'm
quite frankly, I think there were a couple egregious fouls on the Edmonton side. So if anything, it might have been worse. But
well, and then toward the end of the game, you just do what you have to do with Vander Kane when he starts
oh
doing that
yeah,
stuff, and you just get him
yeah,
out of there.
you have to toss him
Right.
absolutely, and it was the correct move for the record not to let him come out for the handshake line.
Well, see. It depends. If he's allowed to and he doesn't, then that's different.
I have a feeling he was still in a state where he was not going to be allowed to.
Well, and see that's the difference. Like if the assumption just is made that he didn't come back out, and like and sure, not being in the handshake line, if you have the ability to make that choice, is classless. But
I
if
agree,
somebody's
and like
holding him back and saying we're not letting you go out there, you know,
I think there
I
are
kind of was under the
situations where that could be the
and
correct
that's the interesting
decision.
part. I kind of was under the impression that you got tossed from the game with 2 minutes left or whatever the hell it was, close to. It was under 3. You know, you're just done. Like
I don't
you don't get
believe
to
you're
come
supposed to
like
come
you're not
back.
supposed to be like to a degree, you're not supposed to be able to come back up, but I get it. It's the Stanley Cup final. I understand.
Corey Perry didn't come back out to shake hands in the stadium or in the Winter Classic when he got kicked out 3 minutes
Well,
into the
that was
game.
3 minutes into the game, though. I mean, by that point in time, he could have Ubered back to the hotel at that point.
Completely kidding. He could have been on a personal flight back to wherever
Sure.
he wanted.
Anyway, anyway,
Yes.
to your point about all this though, with the physicality and with all that type of stuff, this is exactly what I wrote
Who's
about.
there?
Well, what's that?
Who was there? Who was with him?
What with Sam Bennett?
With the Florida Panthers. What team is on that level right
Oh,
now?
well, no, nobody's on that level. What I'm saying is that
Maybe Vegas at full power gives them an opportunity.
well, okay, let's start with this. Okay, let's start with this because I've always said it after the Stanley Cup is awarded because everybody immediately jumps to they did this and they got away with this and why doesn't anybody investigate this and blah blah blah. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Why didn't
Every
anybody
time.
invest in this? Why hasn't any other team done this? You know who
I
did it before them? The Tampa Bay Lightning. Yeah, sure, they had a little bit
So did
more kind of
Vegas.
great. They had a little bit more uber star power with, Prime Kucherov, Prime Stamkos, emerging Braden Point, etc. But like they did it. Then before them, Vegas did it. Then before them, Washington did it. Like this is how you win the Stanley Cup, man.
Well,
Like it's not hard. The
well,
Blues, like every team for the last decade has just been built like a brick house.
no, yeah,
You
well,
know what I
see,
mean? Like,
and you're talking about the physicality level
yeah,
that goes there.
that's what it
I'm
takes to win 4 rounds.
No, but I'm also talking about the LTIR stuff, all that. Like
Oh,
it's
say it, say it, say it,
no, it's
say
part of
income
the league.
tax, say it,
What's that?
say income tax, do it.
Well, because here's where I was going to go with that. You can't control the state income tax thing because that is what the states are. If your
Right,
state's not
right.
one of them, so be it. Like you can't. That's not even a don't hate the player, hate the game thing because there's no way for the league to change that, short of
Right,
moving them out of there.
and by the way, if we start adjusting individual team salary caps due to state income tax, we have lost the plot. Anyway,
No, the LTIR thing is a little bit more of a legitimate argument because that's loopholes within the CBA that you can get away with that,
sure.
and as long as the league doesn't address it for all parties involved, because right away I saw a lot of stuff this morning about they're going to look into Edmonton with Evander Kane. And it's like, yeah, by the way, what happened with Matthew Tkachuk and Aaron Ekblad got suspended
Right.
conveniently with 18 games left in the year,
Right, they
and
managed to pick up Seth Jones with that extra money. Hello,
and
crazy.
Brad Marchand,
And Brad
and
Marchand, and who almost won the who was second place in Conn Smythe running?
exactly.
Like, hello.
No, so but to for on the physicality point, I'm just gonna because I don't know if you saw this or not. I wrote an article after the cup was awarded. I kind of usually try to focus on the things that without mentioning the Flyers' current situation directly. I try to focus in on the things that what everybody's going to try to copy. Let's just put it that way because it's a copycat league. Everybody does that, right?
Absolutely.
The headline of this article that I wrote was Panthers prove there's still room for bullies if you've got everything else. My lead into this was when the Florida Panthers were entering the NHL as an expansion team in the 1993-94 season. Their first general manager was an NHL legend, a Hall of Famer that had transformed the game with his combination of skill and physicality. A bully. Yes, one of those bullies. The first general manager of the Florida Panthers was none other than Bobby Clarke. And I am sure 50 years after the Flyers and those bullies won back-to-back Stanley Cups, that there was smiles on their faces watching the level of physicality and what you could get away with from a team like that had Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, Matthew Tkachuk, a bunch of rats, just a bunch of absolute rats, finding a way to do that because it had those and let's be clear, when the Flyers won the cup in 74-75, yes, they were the bullies. They beat people
Well,
up.
they punched their way to those cups. Absolutely.
They did, but Bobby Clarke was not just, hey, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. He also was, point producer. Look at what
Absolutely.
I can do. And so was Bill Barber. So was
Yep.
Reggie Leach. So,
Yep.
there, and the list kind of
Go
goes
down the
on, right?
list. Yeah.
Right. Like they had skill to go with it. Like it's the same thing. Sam Bennett is Sam Bennett. What Sam Bennett's doing, of
Right.
course, people are going to look at like, oh my goodness, look how much he gets away with. He also scored 15 goals.
Right. Well, and to me, that is where, to bring it back to the Flyers a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
that is where Garnet Hathaway, Nick Seeler, and Nick Delorier are really earning their money. Not necessarily because they're those guys, but because they are implanting that culture, right? Like Tyson Forrester is Tyson Forrester might never be Matthew Tkachuk, right?
Right.
But if rubbing shoulders with Nick Delorier and Garnet Hathaway gets him to have a little bit of that edge, I'm fine with that, right?
Right.
Because what is Matthew Tkachuk? He is a jerk, a rat, prick, whatever terminology you want to use on or off the ice to discuss that person, go for it. But you know what else he is? 57 points in 52 games this year while hurt. 88 and 80 last year, 109 and 79 the year before that, 104 and 82 the year before that. He is also an elite point producer at the NHL level.
Oh, I said after the series was over, you can make the case that at bare minimum right now, they have 3 players who are locks for the Hall of Fame. The head coach is a lock for the Hall of Fame, and you can make the argument in a very short amount of time, I believe only like 5 years at this point, that Bill Zito is already a Hall of Fame executive with back-to-back cups and the way he's built this team. So Bill Zito's got a Hall of Fame case. Paul Maurice was already one of the top 10 in coaching wins before coming to Florida. And now he's won 2 cups. He's a Hall of Famer.
Hey, and he's still young enough that he's probably going to coach for another 15 years at least.
I know. Isn't it crazy?
It's insane. Hopefully he ends up in Philadelphia at some point. Let's be honest. He's got enough years left. There's a chance.
No, Paul Maurice, as I watched people go, John Tortorella was hired like a week before Paul Maurice was. Now listen. I hate that argument because same equation.
That team was way more ready to win. Let's be so for real.
Well, exactly.
If
your argument
John
with John
Tortorella's doing this,
but if your argument with John Tortorella was, well, the team isn't ready to win now, so he was never going to be the right coach, then Paul Maurice isn't the right coach either.
If they hired Paul Maurice instead of John Tortorella would be the one out there doing weird handshake avoidant line stuff. Like that wouldn't change anything. Those coaches are both good enough that the Panthers were still going to be the Panthers with a coaching change. The Flyers were still going to be the Flyers with a coaching change.
Now you want to make an argument over back in around the 2019, it was a little before that, but like around the time, before Bill Zito took over. Well, if you want to make the argument, if you want to make the argument Bill Zito or Chuck Fletcher over Bill Zito, who did also get permission to interview with the Flyers at that time.
See, that one's real.
That one makes more. That one I understand.
That one's real. And by the way, I get that it's a bummer, but no, the Flyers did not hand the Florida Panthers Sergei Bobrovsky. Let's relax.
Okay, hang on a second, because I will get to that because okay, I already like I said, Zito's got a Hall of Fame case with 2 cups now in a short period of time as an executive. Paul Maurice is a Hall of Famer.
No, that's insane. Yeah.
Bobrovsky's a Hall of Famer. We all know it at this point. You got 2 cups, 2 Vezinas, and the numbers that he has. He's a Hall of Famer.
His trophy case is crazy.
Barkov's a Hall of Famer with the number of Selkies he's got now too. On top of all this, what they say also the first European captain to win the cup twice or something. Is what it is? So there you go. There,
2 in a row is crazy.
And not that this wasn't the case. Not that this wasn't the case already before winning a cup this year, but Marchand was a Hall of Famer too. But
absolutely he was.
But this just is the icing on the cake. Hey, you got a second cup in another location.
So I don't think he's going to, because there's too much money left on the table. But he's 37 years old. If he worked this, he'd be an absolute hero in Boston. He would come back and have a boulevard named after him.
And here's the thing: you're exactly right. It's the money on the table. He's going to get paid.
He's going to make $8 million a year for the next half a decade.
Well, I was going to say for at least 3 more years, and I'm saying at least 3.
If he's not worried about going to a good team, he's going to go play a whole lot. He's going to go play a whole lot of golf in Utah for the next 5 years.
Ooh, that's where you're thinking.
No, because realistically, you know what I'm thinking?
Toronto.
I think the Toronto Maple Leafs the crest, falls to Brad Marchand in the night like the Green Goblin mask. I really
I'm gonna tell you right now, if it's not a place like that, it could theoretically be back in Boston.
Did you see? So there, obviously, the Florida Panthers are celebrating the Stanley Cup. And they're at the Elbow Room, the blah, 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 the bar they went to last year, et cetera, whatever. Sure.
Yeah,
And
Matthew Kachuk is tweeting, "Yeah, I'm going. Yes, absolutely, I'm in
sure.
at 4:55 in the morning."
Right. So there's a video of Brad Marchand on the balcony with the Stanley Cup, and someone's behind him. They're all drunk, whatever. And the crowd starts chanting, "Thank you, Boston."
Mhm.
And Brad Marchand turns, hears what they're saying, turns around with the biggest smile on his face, and like joins in for a couple. And it's really funny.
What was the
It's real.
what
It's
was
really
the other
funny.
one that I saw that was going around? Like I think it was Sam Bennett, because Sam Bennett was there. They were all chanting 8 more years at him.
Okay, that's pretty
Which
funny.
no, which by the way, he's staying. I don't care what the
Oh,
price tag is. He's staying.
somehow it's going to be 8 years by 5.5 mil.
I saw somebody put out 8 by 7.5, and
It's going to be stupid.
it
It's going to
sounds
be.
it sounds exactly like the type
Ooh,
of. Now, by the
you
way,
ready?
yeah,
You
go ahead.
ready? 8 years,
Okay.
$88 million. Salary deferral 7.5 AAV. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm
Well,
wrong.
I can give you one reason why you're not. Bill Zito,
Correct.
an agent turned executive. Exactly. An agent would
Tell
come up with
me,
that kind of.
tell me how much sense that makes.
Of course it does. Well, and Bennett's not going anywhere, because how do you pull that level of identity off of your team after winning a Conn Smythe, no less?
Now, see, I think you can do it. Like, here's the thing. That organization is so well run at this point, and that machine is so well oiled that
Identity wise, yes.
if they were to lose him, especially if they were able to retain Marchand at that point, I think your top nine just stays almost entirely intact.
I
You
mean,
find a new piece and keep it rolling.
Marchand's not a bad plan B either,
That's what I'm
for what it's
saying. Like,
worth.
he's
Um,
37 years old, but he'll play a lot of golf in Florida.
no, so Marchand, like I'm going back to, so Marchand's got obviously a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done, also, and
Oh
then
yeah.
theoretically, like they're on the path for it based on the numbers, but I just want to see it. Like I feel like these are guys that need to hit the milestones, I guess. Like cups don't always mean you're in the Hall of Fame. Like you can win 5 cups and be a role player, and it doesn't mean you're getting into the Hall of Fame. But Kachuk is like on that path, and Reinhardt's on that path. Like they're
Yeah.
two really good players with the numbers to back it up. That
Is Aaron Ekblad a Hall of Famer?
man, that's tough.
Yeah.
Ekblad could be one of those. I'm almost wondering if Ekblad's going to be one of those guys we're having conversations about for a long time.
Two
Similar to the way we
questions.
have with some of these other guys.
Two questions. Is he on the Olympic team next year, and does he need Olympic gold to make the Hall of Fame?
Who Ekblad?
Yeah.
I think there's a good
think
chance
you
he's on
can
the Olympic
fill.
team.
I think you can fill a 6, 7, 8 that doesn't include Aaron Ekblad, but I think
It's
there's also a
close.
real chance he's there. And
I mean,
if you put an Olympic gold medal on his resume, the Hall of Fame starts to look pretty enticing. Couple of cups, gold.
it's weird because Ekblad got to 2 All-Star games basically in the first 2 years of his career because they had nobody else.
Yep.
Like that was the early part of the Panthers. Did win a
He's been
Calder
there all the
Trophy.
way up.
No, but did win a Calder Trophy, so you have that. He doesn't have he's not such an offensive defenseman that he's got those kind of numbers. Like he did early on, like several years of like 15, 16, 17 goals. But he only broke 50 points once and only broke 40 3 other times. So it's not like he's been, like it's weird because on the cup teams, he's not even the best defenseman on these two teams. He's not even, and it's not even close. Like think
Crazy.
about it. This year, he's probably the second best defenseman on the team.
Okay.
Maybe you can make the argument that Seth Jones played enough of a role that he was there too, but it's close. Last year when they won the first one, he was third because he was clearly behind Forsling and Montour.
And was probably battling something for sure. So
what, you don't mean like having the abductor torn off the bone and then having a hernia on
and
top of
also
it?
a hernia
Jesus.
thing. Yeah, listen, I talked about Matthew Tkachuk and
I saw somebody put out something like right before either game 5 or 6 that was along the lines of wait until you find out what Matthew
oh,
Tkachuk is going through.
the horror show that all those dudes are fighting
How
through.
about the fact? How about after?
Did you see Alexander Barkov's hand?
Well, yes, I saw that too, but I was about to go to the third. I was about to go to the third guy because the third guy is very casually, no indication that there was. I mean, yes, he missed a couple games. I'm not saying he didn't miss time, but like casually throwing in there. Oh yeah, Sam Reinhart had a grade 2 MCL
Insane.
and only
Like
just popped 4 in the clinching game.
4 to absolutely bury the Stanley Cup. Like it's
Like, I'm sorry. What?
I
4
listen,
goals on a grade 2 MCL sprain.
I tweeted it from the podcast. I'll say it here. Follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Who will save us from the Florida Panthers?
Who will save us?
I think the Florida Panthers, or I'm sorry, I think the Dallas Stars are close to the right mix. I think they have a well-built team as far as combating the Panthers. Um, I think Vegas has a shot when they're at full steam because they are also just crazy murder demons. Um, but looking throughout the league, 29 out of the other 29 teams, I cannot find another one that can stand toe to toe with this
So
team over 6
here's
to
the
7
issue.
games.
Here's the issue with because obviously with Florida, you're not even looking at the Eastern Conference because like seriously, like think about something for a second. Because one of my first thoughts about this Cup final was I know what it says at the end of the whole thing. This was over and it went 6 games, right? This is like the opposite of Rod Brindamore telling you it was a lot closer than that, even though it was 4-0.
Can't believe Edmonton too.
Like those last, I mean, not even 3, honestly, but they won 3 games of the series. Florida did. Game 3, did they? Yeah, they won game 3, right? Game 3 was the first lopsided one. They ended up losing game 4 as a shocker.
They killed everybody. They killed everybody.
In their path.
They stomped through the Lightning. They killed the Leafs in games 5 and 7. They killed the Panthers. They stomped the Oilers in games 3 and
Carolina and then Edmonton. And
I'm sorry, right? They stomped through the Hurricanes. Like they killed everybody. They let 2 series go long just because they wanted to have some fun. Like it's insane, man. It's insane.
So you kind of shift your attention right away to the Western Conference and anybody who's basically going to play the Panthers.
Yeah. And the problem with that is they all have to kill each other to get there.
Well, they do, but also here's the thing, right? Like go down the list of these teams for a second, because Edmonton's a good enough team to still keep getting back. Obviously, they got back for this year. They're good enough to get back there. Why? You have McDavid, you have Draisaitl. You've got 2 of the best players. Like I put this out afterwards. The 2 best players in the series. I don't care who's on the other side. I don't care if there's all these Hall of Famers potentially on the other side. They're the 2 best players in the series. But after 100%. that, you got demolished in the 2 areas that you were clearly weaker in to begin with, and I would like to think it was a little more like a bit of a closer gap, and it wasn't even remotely close in terms of goaltending and defense. Not even close. Like your first area to address once again, if you're Edmonton, is who's the goalie, because that goalie's not getting it done.
Well, dude, and with what? They don't have money.
I know.
Like,
yeah,
it's insane.
They don't have money that they're about to throw a bunch of it at Trent Frederick. Not, not RFA Evan Bouchard that you could probably use. And I know Bouchard had a bad defensive series. Don't get me wrong, but like.
Yep. Just to sum it all up, Bill Zito, I bow down before you. We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
Edmonton needs a goalie. Dallas has a goalie, but probably doesn't have the forward depth because they're very young in some of those areas. Vegas, similarly, I think Vegas has the forward depth to keep up with Florida, but do they have it on the back end? Like, your goalie is still Aiden Hill, who basically in that 1 year in the playoffs, that they won, was the hot goalie at the time.
Right.
It's not Sergei Bobrovsky.
It's more of a Jordan Binnington. He's solid. He's a good guy. He had one really good hot playoff year, but is he an elite goalie all the time? Probably not.
And I'm laughing because that was a name that I saw floated for. I wonder if Edmonton take. Yeah,
Man,
of course.
man, I I would pay video. I would pay money for video footage of Connor McDavid meeting his teammate Jordan Binnington for the first time.
I
Because
hear you
that is
there.
just so much hockey
Well,
crazy wrapped up in one
they have
conversation.
been teammates in the past. They're probably going to be teammates again in
Team
the Olympics.
Canada, yeah.
Yeah, like
Speaking of the Olympics,
well, and here's the thing. So I can't. Speaking of which, I can't wait for the conversation next year when we're approaching the idea that okay, McDavid and the Oilers again for a chance at the cup later. After what? After he gets Olympic gold.
yep.
You know what I mean? Again, you're going to be looking. We will probably be having.
After he gets Olympic silver.
Well, and I hear you. Well,
I'm joking. I don't know.
well, wouldn't that? Now, see, there's an interesting conversation because
That
does
would crank
that?
the rivalry up.
Well, it is up. But here's what I was going to say. So you said Aaron Ekblad, does he make Team Canada? And if they win gold, is that enough for a Hall of Fame case? Remember what I
Silver's
said
not
about
enough.
remember what I said about the numbers? And like,
Yeah.
the numbers are trending for a few guys that like, yes, you've got 2 cups and all that stuff like that. If Matthew Tkachuk is, which he obviously is, on Team USA and wins gold, lock it in.
Oh, absolutely. And okay, so they were on the ice calling themselves a dynasty, and I think that's a little premature. I think you now have a 2 to 3 year window to win another cup. If you do that, you get to be called a dynasty. I think you need 3.
What they need to do now is they need a third in 3 years.
Within the next couple of years. Yeah, within the next 2 or 3 years.
If you've won 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 6 and you basically do what the Blackhawks did in the 2010s, you can go there, I think.
I agree.
Because I think like
don't do everything that the Blackhawks did in the 2010s.
No, well, I think they're already ahead of schedule with that because that was the first one. So just let's remember that. So they're already ahead of schedule. Anyway, my point with that is that like I don't think it needs to be 3 in a row per se. I also don't think it needs to be one of these things where it's like, oh yeah, it's like the Islanders of the 80s and the Oilers of the 80s, things like that.
Now,
like,
if you make it back there next year and lose, then I think you get close to like buying yourself an extra year, right? The window kind of shifts a little, right? We'll see.
No, you know what you're making me laugh with because Bettman's doing the trophy presentation and sits there and says something about this is the hard and I get it. Like we all agree with this. It's the hardest trophy to win. Yes, I get it. And then sits there and go winning it back-to-back years is nearly impossible.
When Tampa just did it like 3 years
and
ago.
Tampa just did it, and Pittsburgh just did it, and
there's been a lot of over the last 2 decades or so.
like
been a lot of quick succession.
Yes. Like since the Oilers of the 80s, it's like Detroit in the late 90s, and then it wasn't until Pittsburgh.
Right. And we don't
like not even Chicago did it, not even LA did it. Like teams that were there and won more than one, but didn't win it in back-to-back years. I get it. But I'm sitting there like going like, it's happened a lot actually.
I will say though, the cap era has made it pretty clear that 2 in a row is kind of the max. We saw it with Tampa, we saw it with Pittsburgh, we saw like you said. Now, that being said, I think the Florida Panthers are in a unique position where A, they have some really great contracts signed already.
Yes.
B, the salary cap is absolutely exploding. If any team's going to make it happen,
that's what's made it so impressive. That's what's made it so impressive because
they built the team through the flat cap era.
Right. Even Tampa didn't. Tampa built it a lot beforehand and was doing it with young contracts. And then it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, these guys got to get paid. So sorry, Steven Stamkos, it's time to move on, even though you've been here for the whole thing. We're moving on because you're not part of this anymore. And that'll run its course eventually. The thing that makes this interesting to me is that I was in the same position as you were. I thought for sure that the thing that Florida was going to run into was, even though you didn't win it in 2023, you got there. So it's a long grind of a playoff run. And then you won it in 24 and you're there again in 25. And I'm going to think the same thing going into 26 because now it's even more mileage than most of these other teams. Tampa was not there in 2022. Or well, no, they were actually, but that was the third year in a row. I'm saying the year after that, when after the third year in a row, they weren't there for the fourth year in a row.
They fell off, right?
It falls off, and they haven't gotten close to getting back because they meet teams like Florida in the first round or two, and it's like, okay, that's the end of the run.
That being said, this team is probably coming back in a pretty
Well,
similar
yeah,
state next year.
yeah, you know why?
Because Bill Zito's a really good general
No, no,
manager.
no, no, no. It's my favorite line
Okay,
because half the league sucks.
you're
Like,
not wrong.
like, tell me anybody out of the Metro that would scare you going up against that team. There's nobody.
Nobody, unless
And then,
unless the Capitals' young players all take another step forward, maybe, but
well,
probably not. Probably not this
or
upcoming year.
or the cap going up, which allows for room for if you're one of these teams that's further along and you say one guy, just one guy who maybe makes a difference in whatever capacity, you know, like, can you imagine somebody for Washington sitting there saying, and I don't know if it's going to go much further than next year, let's just say, but can you imagine somebody sitting there going, you know what? I'll sign in Washington because I'll play with Ovechkin.
Oh, absolutely.
One year. I just want one shot with him to try to have him go out on top. If that's where he goes out.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Same thing with, same thing with, the
By the
Toronto,
way, keep an eye. It was recently rumored that the Pittsburgh Penguins will not tender an offer to Evgeny Malkin. He becomes a free agent
next,
next year.
well,
How about
next,
you? How about you send him to Washington to play with
well, that
Alexander Ovechkin?
hold on a minute. That's the interesting part because there was also, if you remember correctly, way earlier in the postseason, there was that email that came out that, like, I don't know if it has any truth to it or not, but somebody let an email fly in Washington to season ticket holders that Ovechkin's last year is next year.
Which would be very interesting.
Because so
Very
now, can you
interesting.
imagine if Malkin plays one more year in Pittsburgh and then who knows where? And same thing with Ovechkin. Like, are both
Imagine
of
they
them
both go
possibly
back to the KHL.
seriously? Are they both possibly
Oh,
KHL bound?
oh. Well, and it is presumed that there will be an Olympic athletes of Russia team, so it looks like they'll have an opportunity to play together.
It sure seems possible.
So, okay, putting a pin in this Stanley Cup discussion here. We will be back next week.
Yes.
Way too early. Who wins the 2026 Stanley Cup, Kevin?
Well,
I'll give you mine first. I'll give you a second here. The Toronto Maple Leafs.
oh God.
In the first post Mitch Marner year, I think Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs get it done. They use that money a little better. They spread the talent through the lineup a little bit more, get Austin Matthews a little bit more of a steady distributor, and I think they get it done.
I,
Maybe that steady distributor used to wear number 63 for the Boston Bruins.
hmm.
Oh,
It's
oh.
very interesting. Um,
Replacing Mitch Marner with Brad Marchand is diabolical work on the behalf
I'm
of
gonna
the
okay,
Toronto Maple
okay.
Leafs.
I'm gonna give you an interesting one. I don't know if you're probably not going to agree with me on this, but because here's the deal. I don't see anybody stopping Florida in the Eastern Conference. At least early going. That could
Okay.
change depending on offseason. I don't know a lot of stuff yet. But I'll make a prediction for something and say that it helps this team win a cup. That's not the Florida Panthers. So I'm going to tell you that so first of all, my first instinct was to just say it's going to be Edmonton's year, but I just don't see them addressing all the holes, and I kind of don't trust Stan Bowman to address those holes properly. So
Valid.
let's move on from that. I would typically love to go back to Dallas again, but I don't think that's going to happen in year one of a new coach slash,
Have to
other
trust that at
issues.
this point. Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you who I'm going to pick for this. I'm going to say the Colorado Avalanche will win the Stanley Cup in 2026
Now,
with
how many regular season games does Gabriel Landeskog play? Is it over under 35?
wow, that's a good over under set. That's really good. I'll say over, but like hovering at that 41 mark, like half
Okay.
the season.
Okay.
No, here's the interesting part because it falls right in line. Okay, so that's your captain. I'm going to say the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup after adding Jonathan Taves.
Ooh. Now, okay. Okay. They have they have experience with players coming off of long rehab stints.
I
Jo-
also think that he's going to want to go to a team that has a shot to win right away,
yeah.
and
I see.
I don't think the guy needs to get paid. So I think he'll
I
take a 1-by-1 deal.
I would expect him probably with the Colorado Eagles to start.
Well, sure, but whatever the case may be, I can see
Frankly,
Taves.
he hasn't played hockey in 3 years, right?
I can
Like Landeskog is a little different because he was working with Colorado staff and he was skating as
sure.
much as he could, and he was blah 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 blah. Jonathan Taves has been in a Buddhist temple for 3 years, and like I respect his journey and all of that, but like probably going to need a little time to work back up to full strength, full speed here.
And the guy is an outstanding player historically,
Absolutely.
obviously, and I just think that did Landeskog look like a good enough player when it came down to it? Like, I don't feel like he was the reason that they lost, if that's where we're going with
But he
it.
wasn't
Like,
Gabriel Landeskog.
no, but now you get him back in more of a rotation, and I think if you work with Taves, and you add that to everything else on top of it, like,
Right.
I just think that that's, for some reason, that's been standing out in my mind is when he said he's coming back, and it's obviously not going to be Chicago. It's been standing out in my mind a little bit.
Interesting. And now,
Now you
if
watch. I'll be wrong, and he'll sign in Dallas.
well, listen, if he has the desire, and I don't think he does, but if he learned about giving back and treating your community well, with the Buddhist monks, and he wants to come to Philadelphia and mentor some young centers, and he wants to mentor Jet Luchenko and Denver Barkey and all these. Listen, John, I would love to have you. I would love to have you come mentor these guys. Listen, we'll bring Claude Giroux back. You can come hang out with an old buddy. Like we know you guys. We know you guys are cool. Let's be so for real. Like, come on, man. No, again, I don't
No,
expect that. Okay. Is there anything else we had for today? We are going to
no.
be back. I was going to say we're going to be back pretty quick here. We do have a draft preview show scheduled for next week. We're about to work out the details here in the post show. So, in the meantime, make sure you're following us on Twitter. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. Same for all the social medias, except for Blue Sky, where he's at Kevin Durso. Make sure you find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. And all right, that's it. Like I said, we will be back next week with some draft coverage, and then we'll probably have a little bit of a post-free agency wrap, and then, we'll see where the summer takes us. So in the meantime, we'll see you.